Three declarations of human rights compete for influence in the world today. For 237 years, the U.S. Declaration of Independence. Since 1948, the United Nations Universal Declaration for Human Rights, and the most recent 1990 document, the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights in Islam, now providing the 54 member nations of the Organization of the Islamic Conference a human rights standard subject to Islamic Sharia law. For those not yet familiar with Islamic Sharia law, the supreme law of public governance in Islamic countries that abide by it, its principles are completely antithetical to our beloved U.S. Declaration of Independence. While for over 2 centuries, American leadership has been founded in the single most liberating document for human rights in history, the current appointee by President Obama for U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Samantha Power, not only favors the UN Declaration, but seems to completely ignore the dangers of the Cairo Declaration, whose Sharia law remains the most oppressive and extremist religio-political system in the history of human governance. But Samantha Power disregards this danger of Islam. Her transnationalist agenda completely subverts United States human rights supremacy and puts it on par with, of all nations, China. Listen to her justify putting an Islamic Sharia nation in the permanent UN Security Council. This, among many other of her proposed changes, would be devastating to U.S. sovereignty.
We have Russia, which is committing massive human rights abuses, massive crimes against humanity, and even, there are those who say are even on the verge of committing something resembling genocide in Chechnya. There's China, which has, to say the least, an unillustrious human rights record. There's the United States, which doesn't allow itself to be hemmed in by international law. But in the eyes of the rest of the world, we are the aggressor of late. We're more of an aggressor than Russia because we've left our own borders. The Security Council composition, Britain, France, China, Russia, and the United States, these are the World War II victors. What about representativeness now in today's world? What about just even on the basis of population? If the war on terrorism is the defining event of our time, can we really persist in having no country from the Middle East, no country with much of an Islamic tradition at all represented on the Security Council in any kind of permanent way? There are lots of things we could do. We could sort of decide that the Security Council no longer has the legitimacy that we once gave it, so we don't consider it sort of one-stop shopping. And we come up, maybe the Secretary General himself has to be the authorizer. Would we vest that power in him? Well, the United States probably wouldn't. Other countries might. It's the Permanent Five who will have to choose to vest authority in the United Nations. And unfortunately, most of the Permanent Five members, while they will bash the United Nations, will do very little to strengthen it. Very little to give Kofi Annan, for instance, a standing army or something that he could call upon if a genocide threatened tomorrow in Burundi, or in Gujarat, in India, or in Aceh, in Indonesia. There are so many cases where these kinds of crimes could happen again.
If you don't agree with Samantha Power handing U.S. sovereignty over to the UN, tell your senators to reject her nomination as our ambassador. Follow this link to send a letter yourself urging your senators to say no to Power as our UN ambassador. uc4i.org/no-to-power. Or call the Congressional Switchboard to speak with your senator now. Share this video with your friends, as this critical issue will not be widely covered by mainstream media.